Hello and welcome to our MFS presentation on modern business etiquette and communication. Now, a certain level of proper business etiquette and manners is a must for anyone to be successful in the business world. But why is business etiquette so important? Well, first impressions count. You need to start each business relationship on the right foot. Good business etiquette helps you to show those that you're meeting and working with day to day that you're professional and you're trustworthy. Good business etiquette gives you confidence. If you know how to act in any situation, you can approach all business settings with confidence, and you know what needs to be done and how for each situation you may be in. Proper business manners help to show people around you that you're the real deal. It sets you apart from those who don't have proper business etiquette, and it shows that you're legit and that you're someone that they want to work with. And also, business manners make those around you feel comfortable. You'll set people at ease when you show that you know how to act appropriately, and others will know that you're not going to do something unexpected or inappropriate that might make them uncomfortable. Etiquette can help you to avoid accidental insult. People can get upset if you break unwritten business rules, and practicing good manners can help prevent that kind of a faux pas from occurring. And it also helps you to grow and enhance your networking. Practicing good etiquette ensures smooth introductions and smooth interactions, which can boost your overall networking efforts. It doesn't really matter what niche or industry you're in, business etiquette is important everywhere. In any field, you can expect the benefits of learning and practicing good business communications etiquette. Now, it's generally seen that there's been a sharp decline in professionalism in the workplace in recent years. A lot of theories out there as to exactly why this is happening, but many believe that it's because so much business has gone online and we're not having the same amount of face-to-face interaction anymore. Many people are running businesses online entirely, working for clients through online platforms, and even if they may be working from home, and especially in the last year, but even if they're not working from home, they're working in an office, fairly isolated and never actually interacting face-to-face with the client or many of their coworkers. And this makes learning and mastering business etiquette skills even that much more important and more beneficial. So let's look quickly before we go further at the factors that impact your etiquette, because your business manners show across everything that you do. It includes verbal communication, which can come down just simply to the choice of your words. The choice of words is important. Body language is hugely important. Your gestures, your posture, your facial expressions, they communicate your business manners, but they also can contradict what you're saying. Your mouth is saying one thing and your body language is saying something else. So you're sending different messages to your colleagues, to your boss, to the people that you're working with. Written communications is a big deal for business etiquette, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time on that today. It's critical that written communications such as social media comments, emails, and even texts are written appropriately. Internal communications are also very important just as much as external. So meetings, conversations with coworkers, and just the way you work together when you're working as a team, all internal communications are just as important as when you're communicating with clients or customers. And it's also good to understand and know that everyone has an individual communication style. You do and your colleagues do. People communicate differently, and you have to be able to sort of recognize and adjust to different styles in order to work well with people. Etiquette is a critical business skill that communicates respect towards fellow employees, colleagues, customers, business partners, and eventually anyone that you do business with. It helps to engender trust, and it shows that you're a professional and you're a conscientious person. Others will judge you by how you speak, how you act, how you dress, and how you behave. And then they're going to use this judgment to determine whether they think you can handle a project or a job, whether they want to purchase your services, and whether they trust you enough to do business with you. So quickly, just to go over some objectives of my presentation today, there was a lot that I could have covered and it was really hard to narrow it down. But by the time this presentation ends, I hope that you'll be able to fully recognize the importance of business etiquette and appropriate communication in the office today, especially as the definition of what's acceptable is constantly changing. You should be able to use the appropriate form of written communication depending on the situation you find yourself in, and express yourself in a way that builds trust and clarity so you won't offend or be misunderstood. You should be able to communicate effectively on live calls, participate in meetings showing the value that you add, attend events appropriately and comfortably, and be prepared to dress appropriately for any business situation that you might find yourself in. So let's look at some business communication etiquette for business, written communication etiquette for business, sorry. Of course, today, more and more of our communication is done in print or in writing. Print, I guess, technically a lot of people think of more as when you're actually printing something and you get to hold it in your hand. But we're doing much more either in print or digitally than face-to-face nowadays. And of course, no more than in the past year when so many of us are housebound. The internet has become the primary mode of business communication, surpassing phone calls, surpassing face-to-face. For this reason, it is essential to understand and use business etiquette for print and written communication. And the first thing we want to look at is to know when to use print or written communication and when not to. So there are, of course, situations when it's much better to communicate over the phone or in person. And these include anytime you're doing complex negotiations, anytime you have to break bad news, if you're explaining a complicated process or theory, or really any conversation that you can think of where you expect there to be a lot of back and forth. There's no point in getting into email in that situation. Keep it on the phone and it just keeps it much less complicated. So in these situations, you want to call the person or arrange a meeting in order to do the communication that's required. If you're going to be writing, email is usually the first thing you're going to go to. So let's look at some email etiquette. Starting with the subject line. You want your subject line of your email to be short and specific. The subject line doesn't need to be a complete sentence, but it should clearly indicate the topic of the email. Imagine that your recipient is scanning their inbox, looking to find your message in order to reply back to you a few days later. Is the subject line going to be able to help them find that, or is it completely irrelevant? You should always use a greeting to open your email. Don't just jump into what you're trying to say. It's just more polite. It's the same as if you were to knock on someone's door to speak to them face to face. It can be simple. Start with hello, start with good morning or good afternoon, dear John, whatever it is you want to do. If it's someone you've never met, definitely avoid being too informal. Don't say hi, don't say hey. Use the highest level of formality for a person's name, starting with Mr. or Mrs. or Doctor or whatever their title may be, until they instruct you otherwise. How you start your emails is also important, so the opening. If you've never met before, you want to introduce yourself. So write a quick introduction that explains who you are, where you work, or if you work at the same place, what department, what role you're in, so they understand who this message is coming from before you get to the main subject. If you're following up with someone who you have met before, remind them of who you are and what you discussed at your last meeting. If it's somebody you know well, it can also be nice to open with a quick personal question or comment. Even just how are you? How's it going? What's new? Before getting down to business. Be careful of the length of your message. Your email should be long enough to convey the appropriate information, but not much longer than that. Overly long emails are overwhelming and they can waste people's time, and often people won't read them all because they get overwhelmed and they've got other things to do. It's better if you have something long or complicated to describe. Like we said, you can consider a call or a meeting, or just break it up. Each subject within the email that you've planned can perhaps be put into a separate email. Tackle one matter at a time. And keep the formatting simple, just text, and then breaking up the text into small paragraphs, which makes it easier to read and easier to take in. And the final aspect I want to say about email now is the tone. It's better to be overly formal than to be too casual. Again, think we're talking about business. This is not you emailing your mom or your brother. Write each email as if you were writing a letter on company letterhead. Don't let the fact that it's digital communication allow you to slip into being too casual. A few other quick tips. Be very careful not to use abbreviations like U for you, the letter U, the letter R for R, we are. Just avoid all the sort of text speak, as it's called. Try to avoid using exclamation points, and when you must, use them sparingly. I had an editor years ago when I was still in university who after editing one of my pieces, told me, Natalie, just pretend that you have 3 exclamation points that you can use for the rest of your life. Use them carefully. And I've never forgotten that. It is important. Be careful not to write when you're feeling angry or over emotional. Cool down first and then come back to the email a half hour later, a day later, when you can think a bit more clearly about the subject matter. If the email does need to be somewhat lengthy, highlight the important parts. Use subject headings, use bold text, or write a quick summary at the beginning so that the reader can refer back to that when they need to. Bear in mind that your email may be shared with others in the company. If you work within a government or public institution, your communication could be shared far more publicly. It could be subject to freedom of information and be published. So always be careful with what you write. In terms of formality, if you've conversed with this person before by email, try to mirror their style and don't go less formal than they have written to you. End with a response, end with a closing that encourages a response, such as, does that make sense? Or what are your thoughts on this? Make sure that they know what you're looking to get back from them out of this email. Because sometimes you think that they will know and they don't, and then you don't get a reply. If you don't need a reply, be clear about that. Let the other person know by saying something like, thanks again, or please let me know if there is anything else. But otherwise, they don't have to write you back. You might want to write a rough draft of your email and edit it as if you were writing an article or a blog post, especially if the subject is important or very sensitive. For a complex email, again, you might want to create an outline before you start to make sure you organize your thoughts and pare it down to the essentials. Again, don't treat email too casually. It's still a written communication. It's still going to be a record of your work. So make sure that it's clear and concise and professional. If you're sending attachments, make sure you're sending the appropriate attachments, for one, and mention them in the message so the recipient knows to look for them and to open them. If you need to send a very large file, it's better to ask first so that you don't send it and potentially fill their inbox if they are out of the office or something that could be a problem. And then always sign off professionally. You can say thank you, you can say regards, just keep it formal. And then make sure that your email signature has your contact information, including not only your email address, but also your phone number and, if appropriate, a mailing address. And then always, 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 always proofread before you send a message. Sending a message full of errors sends the message to the reader that you don't consider the subject matter or the person important enough to be careful. And there was one other tip that I wanted to share, which is about replying. Let's talk about the reply button. Every time you hit reply all, a kitten dies. I saw this once and I laughed because I used to be really, really bad at hitting reply all, in every email, and nobody's got time for that. If you're replying to an email, be careful about the reply all function. If there are multiple recipients on the list, ask yourself whether whether your reply is something that they all need to read. If they aren't all involved, just hit the regular reply. You can add a few extra people if you need to, but you don't necessarily have to reply to all, 200 people on that distribution list to tell them that no, you cannot make it to the meeting. And let's talk a little bit about text messaging. It's very common nowadays to use text messaging for business. However, it isn't always appropriate, and you can annoy people if you use it too much. So in general, you should use email. Only use text for something that's urgent or time sensitive, or if you've been asked to use text. Otherwise, if it can be done by email, don't use text. If you are using text, let's go over some best practices. Although it's common to abbreviate in text messaging, we already talked about this under email, write out the whole word when you're using text for business. Watch out for autocorrect. I'm sure we all know what autocorrect can do, but autocorrect might correct to the wrong word and of course can cause embarrassing or confusing situations. Maintain the same level of formality in your texts as you would in an email or a business letter. Just be as brief as possible because of course it's text. Never send any privileged or sensitive information over text. You don't know how secure a person's mobile device might be. And even if they tell you how secure it is, you don't know where it is right now when you're sending that information. Take a minute to consider the tone of your text, even if you're in a hurry. Read it over and edit it accordingly, just as you would an email. Don't text outside of business hours or on weekends if not absolutely necessary. With texting, generally, I advise people to follow the tone of your boss or your teammates if you're new to the team. In some situations, texting each other might be the norm, and it might be done at all hours and on weekends. But don't be the first person on the team to text your boss on the weekend. And always make sure that no matter what the culture is, if you're going to be texting someone during their personal time, make sure it's necessary. And of course, we have to talk social media etiquette because social media is a huge part of work now. Social media has, of course, different platforms and each has its own written and unwritten rules of etiquette. When it comes to private messaging in social media, follow the same guidelines as with texting or writing emails. If you're communicating publicly on social media, of course, you've got to think very differently. Always err on the side of private messaging over public when you can. If you're communicating publicly, if you're tweeting back and forth with someone, if you're commenting on someone's Facebook or Instagram, keep in mind that anyone can see it, not just the person to whom you're directing the comment. Be appropriate and on brand, and make sure all communications have proper spelling and grammar. You and your coworker might have a lot of fun commenting on each other's Instagram posts, but it's very possible that your clients are seeing this, even if you don't know that they're following. It's possible that your boss is seeing this. So don't say things that you wouldn't want either of those groups of people to read. To create a good professional image on social media, focus on helping people and not on promoting yourself. Answer questions, offer your expertise or help, and so on. Focusing on helping people will do more to promote you than even the best self-promotion that you're going to come up with. Reply quickly to comments on social media, but also take the time to think before you post. Read over what you wrote and make sure nothing could be misunderstood. Keep in mind that with public comments and posts, many different people will be reading it, so be extra careful with your wording. You should never send an email or a text or post on social media if you're angry, emotional, overtired, or intoxicated. Even if you post hastily or irresponsibly and then you go back and you delete the post, there's a good chance that many people have seen it and possibly have taken screenshots. It never goes away. So moving out of digital and back into actual print, which nobody really does much anymore, but using paper and mail and stamps and all of it, let's talk a little bit about business letter etiquette. Bear in mind that the format for writing business letters is a lot stricter and more formal than emails, digital communications, or personal letters. But there are times when an email just isn't going to be enough. So situations where you might need to actually write a formal business letter include if you're writing a professional recommendation or reference, if you need to write a letter to go along with a legal document or a contract or some other official document that you need to send someone, if you're writing a letter of complaint, if you're resigning from a position, if you're apologizing for something fairly significant. You might be writing condolences. You might be writing a personal thank you. Or you could be writing a cover letter with a job application. All of these are business letters and require your most professional tone, should always be planned and outlined as if you're writing a research paper. You need to organize your thoughts so the letter flows logically from top to bottom. It needs to stick absolutely to the topic and say all that needs to be said on that topic. You also need to proofread and edit it carefully. For a business letter, you also probably want to get another pair of eyes on it and feedback from someone else because you want this letter to have impact. As the tone of a business letter must be strictly professional, refrain from expressing emotions. If complaining or saying something negative, stick to facts and don't let yourself sound angry. If you're touting someone's virtues in a recommendation letter, avoid exaggeration and avoid personal opinion. Focus instead on the tangible things that they've done and the results that they've achieved. Business letters do sometimes include something personal, but the personal note should be left to the end and it should be brief. So you might have a letter recommending someone for a job, and then at the end, quickly tell the recipient that it was nice to see them last week, or you're hoping to meet up again soon for supper. But again, brief and to the point. So let's talk about format for a business letter, because this is one that's important to show the reader that you know what you're doing, that you're a professional. No matter what kind of business letter you're writing, there is a standard format. There is some variation if you actually were to Google standard format, but the elements are all there. You can pick the exact interpretation that you like, but you need to include certain things. So you start with the sender's address, your own address, in the upper left-hand corner, unless, of course, that's already included on the letterhead that you're using, and then you can possibly skip that. You then want to leave a space, a blank line, and include the date. And then leave another blank line and include the address, the name and the address of the recipient. Then you have another blank line and you start to address the recipient. So you start with a greeting. And for a business letter, you start with dear. Dear Mr. Jones, dear Ms. Smith, whoever this person is that you're writing to. If you don't know who to address the letter to, first do your very best to find out. The internet is your friend, LinkedIn is your friend, try to find out. To whom it may concern is sort of a common but out-of-date way to start a letter, and it's even better to find out a department or a head. If you can say, dear human resources manager, it's better than to whom it may concern. So after your greeting, go to the body of the letter, and this is at this point something like a school paper. So your first paragraph introduces the topic and the reason you're writing. Your following paragraphs, whether there's 1 or 3 or 5, each of the following paragraphs expands on one single point, providing more detail. And then the final paragraph quickly summarizes your reason for writing and explains what you want the recipient to now do, if anything. Please respond with, or even a no response necessary, thank you very much. And then go to your signature. For signatures, again, keep it formal. So you can use kind regards, best regards, sincerely, yours truly, etc. And then after your name, include your title and your phone number. You would then list, if applicable, enclosures. So enclosures are the attachments of the non-digital world. If your letter is accompanied by any other documents, then you would list them here. And as I said, there are slight variations on this format. Some people will put things in a slightly different order. Some people don't use enclosures, but generally speaking, this is the format that you want to follow. As you begin to work in different organizations and different offices and departments, they may have their own version of this format, and of course that's what you want to be working with. And just a note to keep in mind, all of your business letters that you're writing for an employer should be written on official letterhead. It just makes it official. Otherwise, the recipient is left, wondering whether you wrote this on your own, whether it was approved by a manager, or etc. Always use the official letterhead. Now, I wanted to address the idea of people read between the lines when you send them a message, an email, a text, or even a letter. The tricky thing about written correspondence is we can't see the other person's face, we can't hear their tone of voice, we can't pick up on nonverbal cues. So as a result, it's very easy to misunderstand each other. This is why it's important to be as clear as possible when you're writing. To avoid misunderstandings, you almost want to over-clarify. Check everything to make sure that what you wrote couldn't be taken the wrong way. Don't assume that the reader knows what you're talking about at any point. And likewise, if you receive a message and you don't understand what someone means in any part of their email or text or letter, never be afraid to ask for clarification. Reword the main points as you understood them and reply to make sure that you've got it right. Just ask them, so as I understand it, you're looking for X, Y, and Z, correct? People tend, when reading, to take things negatively just by default. Negatively is just the way that we see so much of what we take in words. And you don't want this to happen. Someone might read between the lines and see something you're saying as a criticism of them, which was never your intention. So when writing messages, try to make them sound as positive as possible. And of course, a very good way to check for this is to have someone else, someone slightly removed from the situation, to review your message. It could be a friend, a family member, a coworker, etc. And then when you're receiving, again, keep in mind that some people just aren't good at communicating in writing. Their messages are curt, they seem angry, they seem cold, emotionless, or they frequently leave out important information because they're not organizing their writing before they start. So if you have to deal with someone like this, just do your best to be patient with them, to learn their language and their style, and to not jump to conclusions if something seems to be rude or insulting. It may not be the intention. If there are too many communication problems, schedule a phone call or a meeting to clarify things. And back to reply etiquette, and this sort of applies to any written communication, email, text, etc. How you reply is important. It's as important as how you present yourself in your initial message. You want to reply to messages as soon as possible and almost definitely within 24 hours. If you can't reply yet, if you don't have the information or the time, at least get into the habit of sending an acknowledgement. Let them know that you've received the message, that you're in meetings all day, that you're out until Monday or whatever it might be, so they have an idea of when they're going to hear back from you and they don't think that you're just ignoring them. If you are out of office for a while, leave an out of office message in your email and on your phone to tell them when you'll be back. If you have written someone and they've not replied, wait a few days and then send another message. In the politest tone possible, ask whether they've received your first email and repeat the contents so they don't have to go digging for it. Try to avoid sounding impatient and write as if it were somehow your own fault, because again, they're going to very likely interpret this negatively, interpret it as you are accusing them, even though that's not what you're trying to do. So again, try to keep it as positive as possible. So having talked all about writing, let's look at telephones, because people sometimes still use them to do things other than texting and taking photos. So the telephone is still a highly personal and important and effective way to get in touch with someone in the business world, of course. Phone calls are good for relaying sensitive information and important information. They're good for quick messages, for light negotiation when some back and forth is necessary. They're good for quick questions or initial inquiries. And there are some industries where the phone is still highly favored over electronic communication. So depending on where you work and what you do, it might be your primary mode of communication. And bear in mind, when I'm talking about phone today, I also mean Skype or FaceTime or Zoom or conference calls or any other app or program that allows you to talk to people through the phone line or through the internet. Always answer your phone professionally when speaking to business contacts. Your employer may have a style or some sort of format that they want you to use when you answer, but at least in general, you want to answer and state your name or your company name or both. In the business world, generally anything more than a quick call to clarify quick information, you want to schedule that call. Otherwise, you risk a long game of phone tag, for one, calling back and forth and never reaching this person, or you call and they answer, but you've interrupted them doing something important and you don't have their full attention. So again, you're not going to achieve your objective. So get in the habit of scheduling phone calls and schedule calls for as soon as possible, but with just enough time for everyone to actually prepare for the call as if it was a meeting. If you're calling someone in another time zone, try to pick a time that's most accommodating for them out of courtesy. The best times for phone calls are late mornings and early afternoons. People are likely to be tired or just sort of getting started early mornings and tired and kind of easing their way out of the office in late afternoons or evenings. Remember that cancellations are a part of life. Sometimes that can't be helped. But if you do have to cancel a scheduled call, put yourself first in the other person's shoes. So apologize to them for causing trouble and ask to reschedule. Let them choose the makeup schedule if possible, and do your best to accommodate them because you're the one who has canceled. Cancel as soon as possible so they can make other arrangements and use that time effectively. And then, of course, do everything you can to avoid having to reschedule again after that. And in preparation for the call, sit down beforehand and make sure you're ready. Don't treat it too casually. Again, you're on business time and you're using someone else's time, so respect it. Take a moment to jot down some notes regarding what you want to make sure that you say and what you need to accomplish through the call. You can make a basic outline to help you if this will work. Review who you're talking to, open any websites that you might need to use during the call. Think of everything that you're going to need to know while you're speaking to that person so you don't have to go dig it out after the conversation started. Start off the call with a quick introduction. If you need to, remind the other person of who you are and how they know you. It can be good to start a call with something just a little bit personal before you get into business, but a simple "how are you" is fine. Or you can talk about something the two of you have shared, like you might refer to a conference you both attended or another meeting that you've had recently. But all of that said, don't get sidetracked. This is just a quick intro, so you don't jump right into it. But after that quick initial personal conversation, get right down to business. Make a smooth transition by saying something like, "Well, the reason I'm calling is," and then remind the person if you previously discussed this matter with them. When ending a business call, it's a good practice to go over a quick summary of the main points that were made during the call, any agreements that you reached, and any actions either party has to take going forward, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that you're not both assuming that the other person is going to be taking care of what you just agreed to. And then always end the call by thanking the person for their time. Best practices for business calls. Your tone should always be professional, but also warm and friendly. Modulate your voice in a natural way so you're not dull or monotonous or lacking in energy, even if maybe you are. Do your best to hide it. Speak slowly and clearly. Give the other person your full attention. Don't try to multitask. Look at your smartphone, play a game, whatever it might be. Show the person you're listening by saying things like, okay, sure, or filler words as they speak so they see that you're listening to them. And then repeat back to them the gist of what they said in your own words to clarify and show you're paying attention. If you're using video, try to look just as nice as you would if you were meeting in person. Test the technology before your call to make sure it works smoothly. Be aware of your background and remove anything that might be inappropriate or distracting. This is especially true for those of us working at home. Try to look at the lens of the camera when you talk to the other person. It's the same as using eye contact. And try again to use the same posture, gestures, and body language as you would in person. Start the call on time and manage the time well. Stay on topic, move smoothly through your outline, and when everything has been discussed, wrap it up and say goodbye. You always want to respect the other person's time. They've given you that time, and you don't want them to regret it or to not give it to you next time you need them. And if you need a follow-up after the call, do your best to arrange the time before you hang up. You've got them now, so figure out when you're going to talk again. And then afterward, it's a good idea to send a reminder email for the date, time, and items to be discussed next time. Put the follow-up call on your calendar and send a reminder email as the time approaches if it's more than a day or two ahead. So what about meetings or conferences? What's the etiquette involved? I think we've all been here. My number one rule with any team that I've ever worked with is not to hold a meeting when an email will suffice. It comes back again to that same idea we just talked about. You need to respect people's time. There are so many good reasons to have a meeting, and meetings can be fabulously productive when necessary, but a huge waste of time when not, and that's important to remember. So reasons that you might want to have a meeting might include status updates on a project that are more complex and can easily be put into an email, sharing information, making important decisions, tackling complex problems. You might want a meeting to do brainstorming when you need some innovation. You might want a meeting for complex negotiations, or you might want a meeting for team building, which you're just not going to get the same sort of engagement on Zoom or definitely not by email. So what you need to consider if you're setting up a meeting, no matter what type of meeting or how formal or informal, there should be some sort of chairperson. This is the person who will set up the meeting, arrange everything, and it's usually, but not always, the person who has the most sort of important stake in the context of that meeting. If you feel the need to call a meeting to address a new problem, for example, it makes sense that you would be the chairperson. The chair's role is not to dominate, their role is to facilitate. So you might present the initial information people need to know, but then you need to direct the conversation and keep it on track, move it on to new topics, and wrap it up when things start to go off the rails or when the meeting is over. Without a chair, and without a chair who is actually willing to keep you on track, a meeting can very quickly descend into chaos, and I'm sure that we've all been there. Probably the most important aspect of running a meeting is the timing. Decide on the timing beforehand. 1 hour is usually a good time for any sort of substantial meeting, but if you know it's going to take less time, maybe you book only a half hour. Get there early to set up so that you can start the meeting on time, and start it on time even if everyone isn't there yet. You'll probably want to create an agenda with each topic along with a basic time frame. That may or may not be necessary if you only have one topic, again, if you're in a short meeting, but typically tell people what you're going to be doing. So from 2 to 2:15, routine progress check to see see where each team member is on their status. From 2:15 to 2:25, we're going to introduce a new product line. From 2:25 to 2:55, we're having a brainstorming session on marketing ideas for that product line. And then the last 5 minutes, 2:55 to 3, we're going to wrap up and summarize and clarify. And that's your meeting. And so then along the way, if it's 2:35 and you're still on step 1, you know that you're off track, you know you need to pull everybody back, and it's just easier to make sure you get things done if you've got that timeline. To wrap up the meeting, you want to summarize the main points and discuss what each person has to do next. If it's a regular meeting, discuss the next meeting time. If it's something that happens after a meeting agenda finishes earlier than, sorry, I just skipped ahead. If you find that everything is done and everyone is looking restless, you can wrap up early. So business meeting etiquette, in general, of course, only one person should be speaking at any time. Interruptions should not be allowed. Each member should try to keep it concise and strictly related to the topic being discussed. When it comes to business meetings, most etiquette rules are related to respecting everyone else's time, as we've already talked about. The chair should be actively trying to keep these rules and keep the meeting going and keep the meeting on time. During meetings, other related topics often come up, and you want to sort of put these on the back burner. If you do have time, make sure everyone agrees that this is something that you have time to talk about now. Otherwise, put it off until later. Although you should keep things short and to the point, a meeting is everyone's chance to get the information, and you should make sure that they fully understand it. So encourage your team members to ask for clarification when something is not well understood, and take the time to clarify. And also just general things for being engaged and showing that you're interested. Maintain good posture, sit up straight, show that you're paying attention. Maintain an open expression and gestures. Don't cross your arms or generally, make any other movements that make you look either impatient or hostile, and avoid fidgeting. Don't look bored. Stay focused on the task at hand. If you bring a laptop to take notes, don't do anything except take notes on it. Don't let yourself get distracted during the meeting, and turn off your phone if you can do that. If you need to take a call, it does happen. Do it quickly, get up, leave the room. Do not interrupt the meeting. It's not generally okay to eat or drink in a meeting, although you may go to a meeting where food is served, or it's typically, it's declared as a lunch meeting. Otherwise, don't let food distract you from the meeting. There might be unwritten rules specific to a company or a type of meeting within a company. So if you're attending a meeting for the first time, hang back and observe and just see what everyone else is doing and how they're interacting first. And always keep negative or heavy emotions out of your meetings. If you feel overwhelmed or angry, take a moment to cool down before you start to speak. And finally, let's look quickly at business attire. This again is something that's changing as people just aren't spending as much time in an office. But how you dress is, of course, a very crucial component of making a good first impression. What you wear communicates a lot about you before you ever say a word. And what you wear shows that you care to take the time and effort to make a good impression. People will consciously or subconsciously judge you on what you're wearing. So you want to make sure you're sending the right message. Different situations call for different types of business attire, and it varies from industry to industry and company to company, as well as occasion to occasion. For example, bankers dress quite formally. The IT industry is well known for dressing down. You might wear your professional best when visiting a potential client, but dress down for a conference or casual business dinner. You should have all outfits at all formality levels prepared so that you're ready to attend any occasion appropriately. Now, appropriate attire is what's most important, not looking stylish. Any working professional knows that underdressing can make you look like a slouch, but the opposite can also be true. Overdressing can make you look either like a show-off or just a bit out of touch with the situation. So we can quickly just review the sort of styles, the 4 types of business attire. Business professional is, of course, what you usually wear in day-to-day formal business. So suits are the norm, style is conservative. For men, this would mean a suit and a tie. For women, a business suit, a pantsuit, or business-appropriate dress with a jacket, perhaps. For anyone of any gender or gender neutral, you're thinking blazer, button-up shirt, and slacks, essentially. Shoes should be professional and shined. They should not be open toe if you're looking at women's shoes, or strappy sandals, again, professional, conservative. Business formal is quite similar, but it's actually just a slight cut above. It's for the situations where you really need to impress. It might be an important business dinner. For men, this would include a suit and tie, just like business professional, but it might be specifically black or brown with a white shirt as opposed to a slightly more casual look. Women might wear a suit, pantsuit, or a dress, but again, colors are going to be conservative. No bright red dress. You're thinking navy, you're thinking black, maybe gray. Business casual is definitely more relaxed, but still professional. So for a man, you're thinking maybe not a suit and tie, but you might have that button-up shirt and your slacks on. Khaki or dress pants are permissible. Women can wear colored shirts and blouses or trousers. A skirt is okay. Shoes can be comfortable flats or loafers. And sweaters are generally okay for all genders. And then small business casual, which is not one that I hear a lot, but it's definitely it's out there if you start looking. So this is baseline casual, which means that polo shirts, collared shirts with simple, even dark jeans would be okay, but khakis, anything that's still nice looking and not shabby. A woman might wear fitted tops and blouses, casual fabrics like denim or cotton, and again jeans if they're dark and well-fitting and not shabby. You could get away with loafers or even really nice-looking sneakers, the fancy sneakers, right? Now, an important thing to keep in mind with all of this, while professional and formal clothing is very strictly defined, different places, different people can mean slightly different things when they say casual. So be cautious. And if you're not sure what they mean by casual, step up a step. It's better to be slightly overdressed than slightly underdressed. If you're just starting at a new company and you're not sure, again, err on the side of formal. You might want to show up the first day in a nice conservative button-down shirt and either slacks or a skirt, and then just see what everyone else is wearing and step up or down accordingly. Some quick do's and don'ts. Also pay attention to your bag and your accessories. Make sure they match, make sure they look nice. Organize your bag, whether it's your purse or a briefcase, whatever it is you're carrying. Make sure it looks nice, but also that when you open it, things aren't falling out and all over the place. Wear minimal perfume or cologne. Don't overdo it. If you don't need it, don't wear it at all. You never want to be the one who walks into the meeting just reeking of cologne and there's somebody in there who you wanted to impress and they're allergic. Ruined the day just there. Be careful of wearing too many accessories or accessories that are gaudy. They can just be distracting, and you want people to be focused on you and what you can do, not on how jingly your bracelets are, or a big pair of earrings, or a really crazy Batman tie, whatever it might be. Check your shoes, keep them polished, keep them clean. So, in review, we covered a lot, and there's a lot that we didn't cover. But now that you've seen the presentation, I hope you're ready to put what you've learned into action and improve your business relationships. So we've covered the importance of business etiquette and communication and how small improvements can make a big difference. We've covered the basics and best practices of business etiquette for written communications, online and off, how to communicate effectively and professionally on phone calls, on video calls, and the best practices for running and participating in meetings so that the meeting is effective and produces the intended result. I hope this information has been helpful, and I encourage you to get in touch and ask questions if anything is not clear. My email address is on the screen, mfse.employmenteducationtraining@cfmws.com. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. And thank you for listening.